Welcome back to J48 Ministries with Jonathan Pike, Will Bailey, Amy Pike, and Crystal Bailey, where we'll be speaking about Beyond the Vows for Richer or Poorer.
Thank you, Will. All right, Amy, good to have you back.
Good to be back.
Crystal, good to have you back.
I'm glad to be here.
You know, we had a lot of fun last week on this. This week, we're going to take it a little step further, beyond the marriage vows. Now, we do vows. We get up there in front of each other. We make these promises, and it goes something like this. I take you to be my lawfully wedded husband, wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Now, I love what Jesus said when Jesus was speaking, and he says, what therefore God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. Because we talked about last week that marriage is a covenant. It is a covenant vow, and God hath joined us together in a holy matrimony covenant. Now, here's one of the problems, though. We are all excited that day. We get married, the celebration, after the wedding, the ceremony that takes place, and then the honeymoon, and then boom, real life hits. Not only are you combining bank accounts, checking accounts, bills, it gets real. Right after that marriage, after the honeymoon is over, life begins to get real. And then you move on into a transition of having kids, of school, and all these things. But not that it's the richer or poor, but the vows that we made. But here's where it gets so hard. And we talked about this a little last week. Right in there is where sometimes people get tore apart. Because money is a real problem. Money can cause a lot of heartache, a lot of issues. Even when everything else in your marriage might be going good, the finances can put a real stress on your marriage. And I want y'all to, especially to elaborate, and then me and Will, we're going to join in here with y'all. But tell me where it has really stressed y'all, in what areas.
I think the most stressed out that I've ever gotten is when money has been tight, or we've not communicated well on where the money's at, and then all of a sudden, because usually it's me that does our finances, and then I realize that I've spent too much somewhere, or you spent too much somewhere, and then I have to have that conversation. But when I learned that transparency and communication had to happen, whether it was going to be pretty or not, you know, because so many times I think that in marriages, we try to keep it from the other spouse if we're afraid it's going to cause, like you said, that explosive conflict or that rift, that we try to ignore it, or we try to hide it, or we try to pretend like it's not the way it is. But part of marriage is realizing truth. And so if the money's not there, the money's not there. You can't live beyond your means. And so with us, I think it's once we kind of got on the same page that if the money's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. And we have to stick to some kind of budget. It eliminated a lot of those blow-up explosive fights that would happen because we weren't paying attention, or we weren't completely honest with where things were.
For me, it was just a little different for us. It's not the fact that we were spending differently. It's the fact that early in our marriage, we both worked, but I was put out of work. And at the time, I made very, very good money, and you had to go from one income, from two incomes down to one income. And when that happens, you have to really start depending upon each other and start instead of pulling apart, because that money's not there. And what do? Where do you turn? Because it wasn't the fact that we were spending so much, it's just the fact that the lack of funds were there anymore. And that's really hard. And it's really hard to ask for help. And with me, I'm the same as you are, Amy. I do the finances and everything, but we communicate. But when the money's not there, it's just not there. And that's a hard pill to swallow, is when you just you can't make it. You know, living paycheck to paycheck is one thing, but living paycheck to not even living to see the next paycheck. You don't even have any more money left. It just becomes really hard, and really hard on your family and your marriage. It just struggles because you're blowing up at each other because you did something or they did something, but when in fact it just happened.
And the fact of is during that time, you're trying to work as much as you can work, so you're spending less time at home.
Right.
So here you are, not working, working more than you normally would, which limits the interaction between you. You also don't have the money for, and I hope this isn't too open, but for food.
Right.
When we had one child at that point and pregnant with the other, and we had to decide who ate, him or us. So that was a tough one.
I tell you one thing that I think happens to a lot of us, and I think it happens in many instances. Sometimes when you get married, first off, we're all young, and you're not saying we're wise now, but we have a little more wisdom than when we was 18,
Yes.
19, 20.
That's right.
We were very selfish back then. All right, we went from a lifestyle of I wanted a truck, I went and got me a truck. I wanted a 4-wheeler, I went and got me a 4-wheeler. Now all of a sudden, you're going to, we got to have a house, we got to have food, we got to have a light bill, we got to have cell phone pay,
Priorities.
all these things, right?
Right.
All right, but yet you still want your lifestyle that you had, but now there's sacrifice. And originally, I think you get married you think you're in love. You think it's love. A lot of it's lust in the beginning, maybe, and maybe it's marriage. But then as you grow together and you work through problems, that's where love really starts kicking in. You realize
Yes.
you love this person and you will sacrifice for this person. You know, it's kind of like right now. I've got the oldest vehicle in the yard out over there. I don't care. I've got a good vehicle. I love my vehicles. But I want now Amy and the kids to have the best vehicle. That's the
You've always
priorities.
said
That's
that.
the differences.
You want us to have the safest tires.
Yes, the
safest
best
vehicles. 'Cause we drive
vehicles.
more.
You, as you get older, you realize your priorities in life change.
Yes, they do.
It's amazing how we go through for richer or for poor. And I agree with you 100,000,000%, Will. You hit the nail on the head. Especially us men. We think we got to work more hours. We got to work more hours to have extra money, to have extra this, extra that. But then here's what happens. All of a sudden, you get home and you're dog tired, you're wore out, you're give out,
Ill.
and you want to go out to eat that night, and the wife says, "There's no money."
Yeah.
What? What do you mean there's no money? You know, I worked all these hours. I've killed myself so that we have money. And then it's, darling, we had to pay this, and we had to pay that, and we had to pay this, and we had to pay that, and we had to pay this. And all of a sudden, you feel defeated a little bit. But you're looking at life wrong. What about this beautiful family God's blessing you with?
Right.
Yes.
What about this home that you have? What about this food that you have? Yeah, you can't go eat that steak and potatoes like you wanted that night, but you still aren't starving.
Right.
For richer or for poor, I'm going to tell y'all, to me, some of the greatest marriages I've ever seen, and I'm not knocking somebody that's got a lot of money. I'm just going by something I've seen. One of the greatest marriages, some of the greatest marriages I've ever seen, they got married and they didn't hardly have nothing. And the day they died, they didn't hardly have nothing. But they had each other, and that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Money is important. We've got to have money, and it's very important that we have it. But we've got to prioritize, and I think me and you, Amy, have done that, and I know you and Will Crystal have done that. But I'm gonna tell you, if a 20-year-old Jonathan was sitting here, it'd be a different story. You know what I mean? It's amazing at how, though. And I've done it in my office. You counsel people, new marriages that are struggling right now. And a lot of it's over the almighty dollar.
Yes.
Well, and the reason a lot of those marriages, you know, you're talking about that they now have such great marriages is, like you said, those in-love feelings come very easily. They're very fleeting. Loving somebody, because me and Crystal have talked about this, that's when it's a choice.
Yes.
There are days that I may not like you a whole lot because we've had a rough time or we've disagreed.
It's
but
true.
I
true.
love you.
Right.
Yes.
And so no matter what you do, I have to choose to love you, even if I don't like you that day. But I still choose to love you. But those marriages that you're talking about, they have gotten married, had nothing but each other,
Yes.
and were forced because those trials test you.
Mm-hmm.
And they show you what each other's made of. And the more the wife relies on the husband, the more the husband sees that it all snowballs, and it increases both of their walks. And so those marriages grow because of those tests and because of those trials. I think that's one thing that just sometimes the more tests, the quicker it does force that bond and that trust.
I'll tell you, we've been on both sides of the spectrum, and to kind of give you an idea, we were in a 3,500 square foot home, 12 acres of land with a lake, brand new vehicles just about across the board. And again, I was working probably 14-hour days. I come home, sleep, go back to work, and then the rest of the house and the yard would take any downtime I had on the weekends or whatever. So I really didn't spend as much time. And honestly, we were closer together as a family when we actually had less, because there was
Yes.
not as much in between us.
Right.
And I know it sounds bad because I don't ever want anybody to go through poverty, because there was a point where it was way
Really
worse.
bad. Right.
But when we just didn't have much, we
It
took
can
that
become
time.
distractions.
We actually,
Yes.
we spent more time together doing things that, because we couldn't afford to do many other things. So
Yes.
Had to
we
get
found,
creative.
exactly, we found enjoyment, and we still do. And even to this day, even though we have a little extra sometimes, we still prefer to get in the car and ride around and talk about things that we see and go
Yes.
and do things like that, just because it's something that
We do together.
together.
Right.
I got a couple verses right here for y'all. 1 John chapter 2, and it's verse 15 and 16, and it says, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world." And then listen to this. It's verse 17. "And the world passes away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever." That word lust. Now, I'm gonna throw something right here. That word lust is simply what Satan uses to distract us.
Yes.
He puts things in our life. And I'll tell you this. You might have people around you that are more fortunately have better finances.
Yes.
And that old saying, keeping up with the Joneses. And you feel like as the man, sometimes in our case, you're failing as the provider, or you feel like as you're failing your family because you're not giving them that.
What they want instead of what they need.
Exactly. And here's what I'm going to throw at. Satan will use stuff like this because you may not be driving the nicest car, the newest model. You may not be living in a 3,000 square foot house. The kids might have to be sharing a room instead of all having their own separate rooms. But here's the point. Satan will do what he has to do to tear families apart.
Yes.
For richer, for poorer. Let me tell you something right here. And Satan is doing everything in his power to get in there and destroy our lives. And the more lust he can put in our lives of this world that's going to fade away, that the verses just said, that'll make us work longer hours, that'll make us stay away from our family, or that could even tear our marriage apart because we don't have this or we don't have that. Satan wins. You know, like I said, a 20-year-old Jonathan, Amy, Crystal, Will sitting right here versus 38 and 40-year-old. There is a huge difference in your priorities as you grow older. For richer, for poor. I'm not even going to say we've overcame this vow
No,
by any
in
means.
20 years, we'll have an even better perspective.
Yeah,
It's going to continue to grow.
and I'll tell you this: we're probably, truth be told, if we really looked at the bank accounts, we're probably struggling right here, right now. But here's the thing: praise God that money hasn't tore us apart.
Yes.
Where it's so easily it could have.
And you know, when we got married, one thing that we said was we would tithe no matter what. There were times that we didn't know how we were going to, but we did. We've never missed a meal. We've never missed, I'm not going to say we didn't have the power cut off, but that was my fault because I totally missed the bill. It wasn't because the money wasn't there. But we have never done without. Has it been tight? Yes. Has there been times that we didn't get things that we may have wanted, not necessarily needed, because it just... But it's always been there. And I agree with you. The older we've gotten, my priorities have completely shifted, because my goal now is not to have what everybody else has. My goal is to have what I need and to be able to help somebody else that may not have what they need.
Absolutely.
If I'm so strapped that an emergency is going to come up and we're out of luck, we failed somewhere. If we're so strapped that our friends call us and say, I hate to ask you this, but I need some help, and we can't help because we have strapped ourselves because we need it all, like you said, keeping up with the Joneses, and we just had to have the newest things, we have failed. And so that's one thing I think that God has always blessed our marriage, is because you made that a priority. And of course I was raised the same way, but that was the first thing, every paycheck, no matter what, that we gave to our church, the 10th, no matter what. And so we've never done without. Been tight, but not without. And I know y'all would agree. We've never been dishonest with each other when it comes to money. You know,
No.
we've never gone and made big purchases without talking. We've never...
Yeah, that old saying, ask forgiveness, then permission.
No,
No,
that doesn't work
doesn't
in
work in
marriage
marriage
at
at
all.
all.
You know, when you're married, it's like you said, two become one.
Yes.
If you're not okay with it, I have to, follow your lead. If I'm not okay with it, you've always been respectful of talking it out and finding out why I'm not okay with it. And we've had to come to decisions together. You know, you can't continue to live two separate lives with finances. It has
No.
to be one.
You cannot at all.
And let me
It'll
throw
tear you
one more
apart.
thing out right here. One thing that I think is so important, because we live in a life right now where credit and credit cards and you can finance it, we'll make the payments work. Let me tell you something. You can make the payments, but you will be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get yourself tied down to credit cards and purchases. Let me tell you something. The world will finance you for anything, and it's okay that first payment, and then each month as they start adding up, it starts putting stress on a marriage. We know that personally. So one of the hardest times is when we had our credit maxed out, when we had our credit cards maxed out, and it's not worth it.
No.
It really, really isn't, especially if you're a young couple.
Well,
Right.
we had it drilled into us. All of us did.
Yes.
Live beneath your means.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as sometimes that's not fun, it's always been the better option. I would much rather live beneath my means and have that wiggle room in case there's an emergency. Because we all know that happens.
Yes.
In case there's some unexpected expense. I want to know that I'm okay. I want to know that Jonathan's okay. I want to know that if, he almost had to have some dental work done a few years ago that was going to cost a pretty penny, we would have been okay. Would have been, wouldn't have been the greatest whatever, but would have been okay. Had we been maxed out on finance charges and everything else, it would not have been okay. We would have been asking somebody for help. And so, live beneath your means.
I can honestly say right here, and I think y'all all will agree, and we're closing right here. We're out of time. No matter how bad your finances may be right now, it is not grounds for divorce. Can we all agree right there?
That's right. That's right.
No matter what you may be going through right now, I promise you the bills are going to keep coming in. And as long as you live on this earth, you will have bills. But the point is this: it is not worth destroying your home or your family. Turn your life to God and say, God, help me. God, help me with these finances.
Mm-hmm.
Look at your life right now and see where you can cut things out and make life easier. and I promise God will help you. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. If you would like to know how to become a born-again child of God, or maybe you just need prayer, maybe you have something in your life and you just need prayer right now, please be sure to comment in the comments below, and we will be sure to get back to you. Thank you again for listening.
Well, everyone, that is the end of our podcast for today. If you enjoyed our podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe and the little bell to be notified when the new podcasts are released. If you'd like to give to our ministry, please go to worship@woodland.com/give, and in the comments, put podcast. If you'd like to mail us a check, you can mail it to 114 Bayview Drive, Phoenix City, Alabama, 36869.